Welcome back into the wrap, everyone. It looks a little different in here. We got some sexy new graphics, not sexy new people. You're stuck with the three of us, unfortunately.
Far
Mark
from
Ennis, Andy Sweeney, Tyler Greever. We are changing up this week. The basketball schedules are a little scattered, but we have a huge football matchup, obviously, to talk about. The Governor's Cup between Louisville and Kentucky. Both teams coming in a little differently. We'll start with Louisville beating NC State at home 25-10. Not the prettiest offensive performance, but again, this defense looked really good, and Jawar Jordan had a big game.
Yeah, I mean, in the big picture, Louisville beats a team playing with its backup quarterbacks, with its backup quarterback and its fourth and fifth running backs, and they put up a season high against NC State. I think only Florida State had more rushing yards against NC State, with backs, further down the depth chart. In the last 7 weeks, 8 weeks of the season, really just since the Boston College game, they have a reliably good defense regardless of the opponent. And there's no reason, and that doesn't mean it's not going to happen, but there's no reason to think that in terms of the Governor's Cup, like the physical mismatch doesn't seem to be there really on either side. Like Louisville seems to be a little bit more legit up front, and Kentucky not nearly the big blue wall, kind of road grader thing that they've been against Louisville. So it looks like a more even matchup than it has in years.
I mean, it's the first time. Maybe you go back, we'd have to remember Satterfield's first year, but definitely the last 2 years plus, and even some of the games they've won, where I went into this game thinking they were going to win just the way that they did, that they would be more physical, their defense would be better. We understand that NC State, Louisville has their own issues. NC State also does. So if you're telling me, Brock Doman's going to come in, he's not going to throw an interception, they're going to run the football, they're going to play defense in the cold, and they're going to win a game, yeah, I'm not surprised at all. And there's been not many times in the Satterfield era where we've went into a game feeling that the way Louisville can win, it's very simple. We felt like they were going to execute it. They did.
For the majority of the season, special teams have been an asset. You literally have a punter who kicks with both feet.
Yeah, he's good. He's done a great job.
You're making your field goals by and large this year. And, of course, in this one, the offense is a little sluggish. And you kind of fumble around and pick up a kickoff and run it back 98 yards for a touchdown. Like they've generated and been reliable points in yardage and field flipping with special teams this year, and that's a new development too.
Well, special teams has been a disaster for Kentucky. I think you saw it again against Georgia when not just with special teams, but the offense continues to be troublesome because they got inside Georgia's 35 3 times and got no points combined out of those 3 drives, and that's what leads to a 16-6 loss to Georgia. Obviously not a surprising result by any means, a tough effort, but you're finding a second year in a row where Kentucky's trying to find a silver lining in another loss to this team in a season where they might have thought they could compete with them at the beginning of the year.
Well, I don't know what's the bigger story, Mark Stoops making as much as John Calipari or what we're talking about. I mean, I think that's more surprising than Kentucky losing 16-6 to Georgia.
Yeah.
No, I mean, as for the game, I mean, Kentucky's limited on offense. We knew they were going to be limited on offense. They were. That's a kind of a game that Georgia can go on the road, play B-, C+ football, and just win a game. Now, I mean, Georgia was not sharp, and I'm sure Kentucky was part of that. Mark Stoops can do the whole thing after the game, turn on the tape, and they'll, we appreciate them. They see that we're physical. None of that moral victory stuff matters. I mean, Kentucky loses again. This was a game going into the season and even early in the season that we talked about was going to mean something to both teams in the race in the SEC East, and in the end, it did not. Kentucky had to bring in gimmicks. Let's rally the troops for one more game, and that's old Kentucky stuff. That's old. We know we're not going to win. We need all these different things.
I don't know what to make out of this. I mean, I think Kentucky was up for the game.
They were physical.
I think Georgia was not, understandably, having just played Tennessee and all that. I've felt like the game was like a spring game. Like both teams were just basic. Both teams trying to get through. Georgia's like, look, if we don't have to do a whole lot that's all that stressful, that'd be great. And Kentucky's like, look, if it's close, maybe we'll have a chance. And then it wasn't. And we just sort of did a dance, and then it was over. It just didn't feel like either team was trying all that hard.
A game happened.
Yes.
I mean, I would say, Will Levis.
And they reached the end.
Yeah, Scangarello talked about it after the game that he felt better going into this game, so they had more plays that involved rolling him out, him running, using Levis's feet, which has been non-existent. I mean, basically since the Louisville game, since the Governor's Cup last year. What does that mean coming up for this Saturday?
They got in the end zone once and kind of wasted a great performance from Barryon Brown. He had 145 yards.
And Levis can't continue to do things like throw interceptions in the end zone.
It was a bad decision. These are two offenses that are not playing well right now and two defenses that have really played well all year. So where do you start to break this down in that matchup between these two?
Oh, it's quarterbacks. It's Malik, right? It's his health, and if he's not playing, it's Brock Doman. What does he have to do? What's his over-under need to be in this game? He would have to make a couple throws that would be, deep or good throws that would lead to touchdowns or be touchdowns. To me, it's Malik. And then the second part of it on the Kentucky side is, what do they have left in the tank this season? What do they have left? Stoops has got his team up for this game. And Kentucky, they wouldn't ruin Louisville's season, but they need something to kind of put their season on. They beat Florida.
It's an objective accomplishment.
Exactly.
Yeah, it is. And it's, for me, I think it's maybe the hesitancy that almost any of us feel to believe what we think we've seen because of just how shocking last year was.
Yeah.
The first matchup, I feel, when they played in 2019, Louisville hung in there for what it had, 2.5-ish quarters, and then the dam broke in the fourth quarter. Last year, Louisville was favored and goes into that game, and we were shocked. It was like it really was an unmasking. And then you sort of realize, man, Syracuse really stinks, Duke really stinks, and last year's the end of the season was phony. I don't think you can say they're doing the same thing. They beat up on real bums at the end of last year. These are not bums they've played down the stretch here. And in particular, it's the most physical group of teams that they've played that the most closely resembles Kentucky. Clemson, they didn't do great in that one, but Pitt, they did fine. NC State, they did fine. And I don't think Kentucky's front is better than any of those.
I feel like Scott kind of needs this one out of all the past editions. It would not, I agree with you that it wouldn't ruin Louisville's season by any means, but I think it would put a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths to rebound the way they have rebounded and yet still cannot beat Kentucky in this game.
What would be frustrating for a Louisville fan would be you've watched, a month and a half of football that you believe in to some extent, right?
6 weeks?
Yeah, even in the loss to Clemson, you're like,
you look like you belong.
Like you saw it, right? You saw, if we were a little bit better in these spots, we were able to hold up. If Louisville went out there and played poor, I'm like, man, for 6 weeks I've been believing in the football that you put out there. Why would Kentucky be any different? It's like people that are bad at taking tests, okay? All the other grades, all the other homework, Satterfield has nailed this season for the last month and a half. But now is the final exam.
Kentucky is not demonstrably better or worse than Pitt or NC State. And Louisville has held its own, and I think Louisville's held its own really against different kinds of offenses. I just don't feel like we're going to get that, where it's just that mauling up front. And if it just sort of becomes a chess match, that's what we've been dying for, is what that would be like.
The one area where I think Kentucky's better than Louisville, hands down, is actually at the skill positions this year. I feel like they're more explosive on the outside with Dane Key and Barryon Brown and Tavion Robinson if he's healthy enough to play. But the problem is UK hasn't shown you the ability to consistently exploit that. And I feel like if Kentucky's going to win this game, it is hitting the explosive plays to your weapons on the outside, because Louisville's defense has been good. They don't give up as many big plays as they used to, but they're still susceptible to a few of those breakdowns every now and then.
Well, this is what goes into it. If Kentucky goes out there and starts hitting long plays, and Levis starts running, and their offense doesn't look constipated, it doesn't look the way it's been. Okay, that's an old school football term. You like that? Yeah. I mean, if I'm a Louisville fan, I'm sitting saying, where was this? And a Kentucky fan, where was this? Yeah. I mean, you're right, Tyler, on all those things. Hitting Barryon Brown, Dane Key, being able to do things there. I'm with you. It's just not something that I have trusted this team doing against anybody. Against Georgia, against Missouri, against Vanderbilt. I'm not even holding them to a high standard. If Kentucky comes out and they play a game that we haven't seen in 2 months, a month and a half, what's the Louisville reaction going to be?
You'll never believe anything going into that game again. I think Scott can lose with honor here, and people will be like, all right, they're making progress. But if it's an unmasking like it was last year, I don't really know how he would survive.
Let me ask you this, guys. Sorry, let me just if Brock Doman, so if he plays on Saturday, and Louisville loses, are we going to change the analysis after the fact? Because this is the most difficult thing for me to analyze. Malik has been benched the last 2 years in this game. So is Malik the better player than Brock Doman? Well, yeah. If you probably had the
when he's fully healthy,
I mean, there's no doubt about it. So, you throw Brock Doman in, who's won games now, who has been competent even against Clemson, and you feel comfortable with him. But if he goes out there and suddenly it's a little bit different, he's in a rivalry game, right? And J.J. Weaver's getting home, and some of the defensive players, he throws a pick early. Suddenly you get behind. Again, Kentucky, who knows? Maybe it's a C-Rod up the middle. You get behind, then you start pressing. There's no one behind him. Then after the game, we had Brock Doman, right? But we believed in Brock Doman.
I don't think that'll fly.
I don't think it will either. And I think that's the most interesting part of this game.
Because we know Malik Cunningham, even if he does play against Kentucky, I think we can confidently say he's not going to be at full strength.
No,
not at 100%.
Right.
He might be closer to it. And there's a part of me, and again, this is total speculation on my part, but it wouldn't surprise me, and we talked about this last week, that if Louisville was just like, hey, Malik, the Kentucky game, we know that's one you probably want more than anything. If it means missing your senior day, are you good sitting that out to make sure you're healthy for the rivalry game at the end of the season? That wouldn't surprise me whatsoever if that's how they approach that game. And honestly, I think it's the smart way to do it, because you watched it against Clemson, he wasn't the same guy. He was uncomfortable.
Yep.
The hand was bothering him. He gets tackled. The shoulder starts bothering him. But you're right. It's not an excuse if they have to play Brock Doman, because Brock has shown he's competent. He can make plays. And with Malik Cunningham's health as it currently is, there's not a huge difference, I think, between the two. Right.
No, and I think just to wrap that discussion up, nobody would benefit more from a win against Kentucky than Scott Satterfield. But a close second in terms of just sort of overall legacy and thoughts. Malik Cunningham to win that game, and I know he's been a disappointment in a lot of Louisville's biggest games, but to win that one and sort of be like, we finished off the getting over the hump of getting back and being able to beat Kentucky, I think it would whitewash everything.
I mean, it would also be a stake in the heart of big bully Mark Stoops. I mean, obviously he's not going anywhere. We know the contract. Do we understand all of that? But it would be probably a personal thing for him. He entered the matchup complaining about L's down. We had the COVID year. They come back. We know what happened last year. I think for him to, I don't want to say get over the hump, okay, because this Kentucky team is rather normal. But for Scott Satterfield, I think it would be a big thing. Plus, they would go into the offseason with a little bit of momentum, something that they haven't exactly done around here the last couple years with that recruiting class coming in and everything else.
And the vibe in the rivalry will be fascinating, because if it happens. Now, if Stoops wins and he wins his way, it'll just be
demoralizing to Louisville fans.
If Louisville wins, Scott gets an extension, they bring in 80% of this recruiting class, whatever it is. They finish with a good recruiting class. At the same time, Stoops will have lost as an established coach to Louisville for the first time really since he really got everything going there. Probably going to have wholesale changes on the offensive side of the ball, staff-wise. And the recruiting class is hovering in the 50s, 40s. I mean, you talk about something flipping. I try to tell people this all the time. Rivalries get lopsided, but they don't stay. And they usually turn around, or at least start going in the other direction, about a year sooner than you thought. And we would be there.
This season's already a disappointment for UK. I mean, even if they beat Louisville, but it feels like beating Louisville was the last thing you could just kind of grasp onto and feel a little good about something.
At least we beat Louisville, and it would really be like this team that lost to Vanderbilt and loses this game in South Carolina, got blown out and all that, but still beat Louisville. I mean, it would feel like a very kind of harsh reinforcement of the tropes of the rivalry right now, for sure, especially if it's a physical manhandling up front. That would be compounded even more by the fact that Kentucky hasn't done that to anybody. It would literally be like they can just do it to you.
The recent history of this season, everything's in Louisville's favor. The recent history of this rivalry, everything's in Kentucky's favor.
Yes.
Yes. I mean,
right.
That's what makes this is what's going to make it a mess.
It is the proverbial throw out the record. I mean, it is. It is.
I was hoping so much that we could go this whole segment without saying
plugged
that.
in.
And you did it right at the end.
All right, let's go back to the beginning.
It's also a holiday week, so a happy Thanksgiving to you guys, your families, to everybody at home. You'll enjoy the game. We'll be here on the day after to break it all down. But for now, Mark Ennis, Andy Sweeney, Tyler Greever, this has been the wrap. Thanks.